You're watching LMCC, your community TV.
Hi there, and welcome back to this edition of Capital Update. As always, today we have our representatives from SD 33, Senator Osmek.
Hi.
Representative Hertaus.
Good afternoon.
And Representative Pugh.
Hi, Randy.
Thank you guys all for being here. You guys have been in session for just a little bit, the unsession for just a little bit over a week. And I thought it'd be a great way to start off just talking a little bit about what you've seen in the first week here, and then we'll get into what you expect to see and what's going on. So Representative Pugh, why don't you start it off?
Great. Well, I haven't seen any unsession material yet. No repealing of anything, and I would have thought we would have shot right out of the blocks with that. But we have been moving at breakneck speed, Randy. I've had several committees that have reconvened at 6 o'clock. We were there until 10:15 in government operations the other night, and we've already had committees added on Friday, which is a non-committee day for one of my committees. So we're really moving. There are a lot of bills that are being, really whipped through.
So new bills.
Yes.
Okay, because the unsession was supposed to be, all we've heard in the news is 1,000 plus laws coming in to take old bills out. Are these those bills saying new bills to take the old bills out, or new bills on top of?
Well, I haven't seen any of those. I don't know about my colleagues, but we have seen new bills layering on more bureaucracy and more. So and some really tough bills, really not so good. So
well, we'll have
that's
to get
what I've experienced so far.
More into that. So breakneck speed, bringing new things to the table, nothing pulling off the books like we've been hearing. Jerry, what's?
Well, thanks, Randy. I guess, as typical would be the start of a new session, I see the halls are filled with people. The elevators are filled with people, the rotunda. Being the start of the session and with the budget forecasts as they are, there's plenty of constituents and people down there lobbying and advocating for more money. You might think that with all the people down there, we're handing out something. Nonetheless, it's been a busy place. There's been, as Cindy mentioned, quite a bit of activity with committees, a lot of new bills and new legislation. I think we're seeing much circumstance of really not too much of the unsession so far that's been touted as far as removing some of the unnecessary laws or repealer bills. Probably the most recent repealer of anything that we saw was yesterday in the House. We passed off the floor repeal of some of the unnecessary tax increases that were imposed on hardworking families this last session.
So great. And Senator Osmek, you sit on your side. I imagine you're getting all ready to move into that new office building that they're proposing for you guys. And
Oh, yes. We came up with a new acronym for that one. We call it the Senate Legislative Office Building. We call it the SLOB.
The slob.
Yes. Well, I don't look at this as the unsession. That's a great, quaint little name that they use for it. I call it the untruth session, because the truth is they're trying to undo the truth. The truth is that in Minnesota we taxed $2.3 billion, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to hold a parade for the majority party when they start to send a couple of bucks back. This is sort of like having a guy rob you at gunpoint and take $100 from you, but then give you a 20 on the way out, saying, "But you can thank me later." This is not something to be rewarded. Hardworking, as Jerry said, hardworking Minnesotans lost last year, and we're not going to untruth that subject. Another subject, and this is one that hits this. I'll say it hits Jerry again. I brought with a quote, and this quote comes from Jerry's soon-to-be opponent. He said, "My opponent voted for higher property taxes in the 2013 legislative session." And Jerry's too big a man to not take a swipe at our friend Todd. I'm not going to let him off the hook. Jerry didn't vote for tax increases. He didn't vote for the tax bill. Neither did Cindy, and neither did I. Because we knew that it was an untruth. We knew that tax bill was not the reality They said in the tax bill, we're going to have historic property tax reductions. Historic. In Mound, because I left a council that was in good hands, they did reduce their taxes. But when you look at the cities around the state of Minnesota, only 1 out of 8 cities, 1 out of 8 actually reduced their property taxes as a result of the tax bill and the legislation that we did. Taxes in Minnesota, property taxes in Minnesota, for cities went up $30 million last year, and for counties went up $32 million. We voted against increasing property taxes, and for the person who Jerry has to face in the next election, that is an untruth, and I will hold these people accountable for untruths this session and every session.
I want to make 2 comments. One, the one thing I think most watchers of this show, viewers, are going to say, well, my taxes did go down. And I think it's important for them to realize the tax base is not just your home. It's the commercial and industrial. And while your taxes for your homestead may have indeed gone down, the taxes for your local business and local industries or industrial properties most likely went up much higher than they should have. And this bill didn't show that.
Absolutely.
Now, let me just clarify something. I don't hold local jurisdictions in disfavor just because they happen to raise taxes. People know I've actually voted for levy increases, and so has Jerry in his city. They do what they have to do to run their city operations. However, if you're going to sit in St. Paul or if you're going to campaign on something saying we're going to reduce taxes when you don't have the controls to do it, that is an untruth, and we're not going to let the untruth session continue to percolate. We're going to tell the truth and make sure Minnesotans know.
And I agree with that. The other thing that I do want to just bring up, because I always think it's funny, is how any bonding bill or anything that we do, budget, there's a time slide from when they pass it and when it takes effect. So $2.2 billion of additional tax dollars here. Part of it is, this income is from that taxing. But how much of this would have occurred had we not done anything? Because, the last session when the Republicans were in control of the House and Senate, we reduced taxes and we still had a surplus happening, $500 million of a surplus.
Well, even a little bit more than that, and what most folks don't understand or realize when a new session begins, we're still operating under the previous administration's budget.
Right.
So all of last 2013, while we were working on the next biennial budget, we were under the revenue forecasts and the realities of what was put into place by the Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. So the month-over-month forecast while we were in session last year during January, February, March, April, May, the fiscal year end for Minnesota ends June 30th. And so all through June 30th of 2013, we were still operating and running under the previously imposed budget, which, by the way, erased a $5 billion deficit that the Democrats left for Republicans when they took control of the House and the Senate. The $5 billion was erased, the school shift was paid back, and budget reserves were replenished. And month over month, during January, February, March, April, May, we had revenues were over the forecast. So we were building and continuing to build all through last session budget reserves and a surplus in the budget because we believed as conservatives that when money is left in the private sector, left in the hands of the people, the economy will grow better, and each time a dollar changes hands, and certainly the private sector circulates money faster than government does. Government collects and levies money once a year and then makes an appropriation. But left in the private sector, it changes hand, and each time it does, there's sales tax that are collected, there's income taxes that are collected. So we do believe, and some will be in disfavor about supply side economics, but say what it is, people tend to spend money in the efficiency of the market, buy the things that are important to them, not what government deems is necessary.
So, Jared, Senator, did I cut you off though? I felt like you were going to make another comment.
No.
And Cindy, you're always ready to say something.
I could not say it better than Jerry did. I mean, the only point that I would make is that we would not have needed to raise a dime in taxes, but there was this insatiable need for spending, $2.1 to $3 billion of spending, taking money out of hardworking Minnesotans' pockets. So we would not have had to raise a dime in taxes. And the business-to-business taxes made Minnesota businesses very uncompetitive. And yes, I was delighted to cast those yes votes in support of repealing those business-to-business taxes yesterday. But
And they passed?
But I
didn't catch
passed
that.
the House, and now it's on to the Senate. And the governor wants more. He has said that the headline of the paper today was that this is not enough. I mean, we put forth amendments to pass more cuts. I hate to even call them cuts. They're not cuts. It's giving back the money that we took from hardworking Minnesotans. But those amendments were rejected.
And maybe the last couple comments on the budget is that, we have two aspects to Minnesota finances. We have the general fund budget, and then we have the all funds budget.
Right.
And for the first time now, Minnesota has passed the $70 billion mark for an all funds budget for a biennium, based on
70 billion, say that again.
$70 billion.
With a B.
Yes.
And the general fund budget is about 55% roughly of the all funds budget. So when you look at the increases in all funds spending, we are now above 11% of an increase in a single year, in a single biennium for tax and spending increases. It's just unprecedented, especially in a recovering economy.
Right.
We have in Minnesota still about 49% of all workers are either underemployed or working at a job that is paying them less than they previously were working.
Sure.
And our district has felt a disproportionate burden of this excessive taxation. We've spoken about that before.
Right.
And we may very well be the Senate district in the state that has been the hardest hit, for certainly by the fourth tier tax and these business-to-business taxes.
And Senator Osmek had that chart here the last time, I think, when we spoke about that. So you know what, let's go to break, and when we come back, let's move on from talking about the budget, even though it's something that's very big, but there's a few other topics we should get to, and when we start on the next session, we'll bring those out.
Yeah.
Great.
We'll be right back.
Here's what's coming up on First Responder TV. We'll talk with St. Bonifacius Fire Chief Shane Weber about how to ensure your home is safe on Safety Source. The Excelsior Fire District trains every winter to respond to ice-related emergencies. We'll introduce you to Rick Eltendorf, a Loretto firefighter who goes above and beyond, and we'll give you an update on scams that have been targeting citizens in the lake area on Scam Alert.
First Responder TV airs daily on LMCC's Channel 12.
All right, well, welcome back. When we start this session, we're going to talk a little bit with Senator Osmek, or start the conversation off with Senator Osmek about transportation. You've been a leader on this conversation quite a bit, and you mentioned at break that you had some things that you wanted to bring out to us.
Yeah, we're not done with taxes yet on transportation in Minnesota. Right now, actually, I have a bill that's in draft form that we can agree upon with the Democrats on what we can do to change transportation in Minnesota. We can rededicate $32 million that we currently send into the general fund from rentals and leasing agreements on cars. We can send that where it belongs. Half of it right now goes into transportation. The other half of it goes to general fund. That money belongs in transportation so that we can fix our roads and bridges. That's $32 million per biennium. And we do have a surplus. People are saying, well, you're spending some of the surplus. Well, there's a certain amount of truth in that. However, we're spending it on it to make sure you can get home faster to your families, to fix the potholes so you're not having to have a four-wheel alignment every 2 weeks because you're hitting these potholes that are the size of hubcaps. So, we want to spend it on transportation that matters, and that would be into the county state aid fund, which is county roads, as well as onto any of the trunk highways that we have. So that's one opportunity. The other opportunity we have is in the last legislative session, we actually made cities and counties tax exempt. My proposal is, why are we making MnDOT pay for sales tax on what they buy? When they buy a pile of snow, they buy a new truck, they pay sales tax like everybody else. 6.875% will wash back into the general fund. Why? That should be money that we get the longest, biggest buck for the dollar in the transportation area. So let's make them tax exempt, as well as any of the subcontractors that they work with, save the money to continue to invest in roads and in bridges. One other proposal that just, we all know about Southwest Rail. Right now, it looks like Minneapolis isn't going to go along with this because they can't agree with the tunneling system. That is one of the most expensive types of transportation options that you have. So, but going along for the ride are opportunities for the other side. They want to put in a distributor's tax, which would create a 5% tax that will be passed to the customer. Think about what happens if you get to $4 a gallon gas. That'll be 20 cents a gallon in new taxes, not existing taxes, brand new taxes. And also the most insidious part of that tax is as gas prices go up, the tax gets bigger. So at just the right time where you don't want to hit people, you're going to be taxing them even harder. So we've got some challenges in transportation, but I think we can do it together with the Democrats if we pick out the things we agree upon. And I think those two proposals we can get through the legislature if the Democrats want to truly take transportation to another level in Minnesota.
Well, that'll be interesting to watch. Transportation, you hear about it all the time, especially now as we're coming out of winter and moving into the construction season. We'll be hearing more and more about this. I'm sure MnDOT and the commissioners will be out talking about what they need. So.
And my only follow-up to transportation is I think a lot of the issues with regard to the difficulties that government faces lies underneath our feet. And what I mean by that is an independent energy policy and our expansion of our domestic energy, having low-cost energy to fuel this economy is what's necessary to expand and grow the economy and grow the jobs. If you grow the jobs and grow the economy, then the rest of the revenue will follow. And taking care of our infrastructure should be a priority, as Senator Osmek has aptly pointed out. Dedicated dollars that are being collected under the guise of transportation ought to be staying with transportation.
Concur.
And I think with regard to the number that you may have shared, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the tax exemption for MnDOT expenditures, when you look at the size of their budget, I think we're talking $70 or $100 million.
Well, it could be upwards of that. We haven't gotten the full fiscal numbers. The low number just in one portion is $7 million. So we're talking at worst $50 million every biennium, which could fix 494 in its entirety between 55 and Fish Lake in one cycle.
Right, it's not a rounding error, it's money. Is
Right,
what we need
and
to
then
do.
that money continues to be spent
Right.
every biennium going forward, so it pays for itself. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity we have.
I think that
And I'd like to thank Senator Osmek too for his hard work, especially as a freshman in the Senate, and he's taken a real lead on transportation and already made a significant impact on what's
That
getting
was
done.
going to be my only add to. Really appreciate the senator's leadership.
well, thank you, Senator.
Okay,
On
enough
behalf
with
of
the
our
Dave
whole-
Lovin.
Yeah, well, no, you got to take it when you get it.
On behalf of our whole Senate district.
No, it's
This
true.
is very, very important, and it is true.
So fantastic. Hey, Representative, at break we were talking a little bit about some of the changes that might be coming to mortgages and liens, and I was kind of shocked to hear some of this, but I imagine most people haven't heard about it because I hadn't heard about it yet. So if you would educate us on what you're hearing with this new mortgage bill.
Well, thanks, Randy, and I'll try and just keep it to a couple of minutes. But yes, there's been efforts to help people that have faced foreclosure and mortgage foreclosure. And one of the bills or legislation is proposing that mandatory mediation be a step in the foreclosure process. And although I think those are goals that are, probably have a little bit of merit in making sure that people can stay in their homes as much as possible, one of the problems is in this particular legislation, it sets forth a mediation process and grants authority or power to a mediator to extinguish second, third, fourth junior mortgages in a foreclosure action if those individuals don't demonstrate in the mediator's sole discretion good faith in negotiating some type of an arrangement with somebody who wants to enter into that. Well, the problem is, how does one of the basic tenets in our whole construction of our Constitution and what makes America great is the preservation of property rights and private land ownership. And when you talk about taking a third-party mediator who was not a principal in a contract or a contract obligation, what should we be doing to be granting power for that individual to extinguish somebody's interest in property if property was pledged as security? what this will threaten to do is to really drive the secondary mortgage market right out of Minnesota.
Right.
And for all those folks that rely upon a second mortgage or a home equity line to maybe fund the transmission repair, or if they lose their job, they certainly have access to credit to continue to make their mortgage payment on time so they don't face foreclosure, medical emergencies, college tuition, whatever is the circumstance. The second mortgage market could completely disappear. And I just felt it was so bad, I just did a little study into our own state constitution, and amazingly, and I guess I had missed it in reading it before, but Article 1, Section 11 specifically prohibits the legislature from passing laws that are an impediment to contract obligations. It's just clear and simple. It's a very short paragraph, and that's
So given that,
unconstitutional.
Representative, why wouldn't this be dead on arrival?
It should be dead on arrival.
It absolutely should be.
I mean, if it's not consistent with the Constitution of Minnesota, I'm
And
confused.
what's going on really is that oftentimes a bill will have to go through several committees, whether it's housing and on to GovOp or civil law. And it's important to note that right now what we're seeing is a real stacking of all sorts of testimony about how good this law is, but a real cutting off of the time within committees for there to be a meaningful debate about the legislation. And it's just a real effort on the part of the current majority to just say, well, it has to go through 2 or 3 more committees, pass it on, and it'll still be vetted. But I think Cindy probably
the
has
breakdown speed
some
there.
comments about that, about the experience of what it means to have it passed on. So I'll turn to Cindy and give it to you.
I completely concur with
Yeah.
everything my colleague just said. And I did hear that particular bill in committee, and like several other bills that we've heard, that one is most definitely unconstitutional. But there is a mindset that we are going to pass this bill, and that has been stated. It has been, we've seen watches looked at and said we're going to pass this bill in the next 10 minutes. Whether we've heard from the opponents, whether we've really fully vetted, there are many, many more questions that my colleagues have had about particular bills, and we have been told, no, just don't worry about that. This bill is going to be traveling to multiple committees, so you'll have that opportunity. Well, many of us serving, say, on civil law or on government operations, hearing these bills with specific comments within the purview of those committees, don't serve on these other committees. And in fact, when this happened to us last session, we were told to wait until the next committee, and when we did, we were told that our questions were not within the purview of that committee. So I'm anticipating and kind of feeling like this is what's happening, and it's quite frustrating that, again, we're moving at a speed that is not allowing the minority, and all we have is our voice. Our vote doesn't make a difference hasn't in any committee.
It's interesting, and I know I brought this up 1 or 2 tapings ago, that when the 6 of us, the 3 of you here and your 3 opponents were having our tapings, we spoke about the fact, or they spoke about the fact that they would reach across the aisle and cooperate with all of you or their counterparts. And it's been a underlying theme through each of our tapings since the 3 of you have been elected. That is not happening at all. They manipulate to the most degree. They do what you had just talked about, Representative, where they say, well, we'll talk about it in the next session, and they come back and say, well, that was supposed to be the last. So I only bring that up because it disturbs me a little bit to hear that one of the campaign promises that they would make is that they want to work with the other side, and they're not doing that at all.
It's apparent that the majority, at least on the committees that I serve on, that the majority is directing the committee chairs as to what bills are going to be heard, which ones are going to be passed, and they are being passed. In fact, the other night we had an executive director from one of the state office agencies, and he was brought as a testifier for a bill, a very bad bill. It was not at all ready not even for prime time. It just wasn't ready. And the very first comment that came from this expert testifier was, this bill is unfeasible. This bill does not have, and so why would that, we moved to table that bill, and that was rejected, and the bill moved on to the next committee, even with that testimony. So this is somewhat reflective of my experience so far.
That's amazing. Now, we are wrapping up here. We only have a few minutes left, but I did want to bring this up because we talked about it at break. The bullying bill. as of the taping of this show, to timestamp this, it was moved out of the Finance Committee. It was pulled from the Finance Committee. We talked about it. We will see it back. You want to talk about this quickly? I don't know who wants to take the topic.
Well, it was pulled out of the Senate Finance Committee. It already passed out of the House, so it's sitting in the Senate, and it's now going to be heard. I understand next Tuesday at 8:30, and it's going to be heard in an education policy committee.
Will it
And
pass?
there is, I don't know, I haven't had a chance yet to take a look at who the members are on that committee, but I have not received, I've received an incredible amount of feedback from constituents for the first time ever who are prefacing their comment with, I've never reached out to my elected official before, but this is a very, very big deal. And it's forcing a one-size-fits-all, the bill as it is, on our parents, on school districts, on elected school board members, superintendents, a $25 million mandate. There's just nothing good about this Safe and Supportive Schools Act.
So more to come then, and we do
More-
have to
more
wrap
to
up.
come.
So the unsession should have been a short session. When do we wrap up?
May 19th.
May
That is the
19th.
last day possible, and I
So
believe
we will
we'll
go to the
the
end.
very end.
I agree.
May 19th for the unsession. This should have been an easy deal, and we haven't heard the bonding bill yet, so that's still to
Right,
come yet as
right.
well.
It's
No,
supposed
and
to be a
that's the
bonding
big
year.
one, and that's one of the chips I think that's being played here is that they're all on the same side, but they're all jockeying for position. And one thing is that they need Republican support in both chambers in order to pass the bonding bill, and we are holding we want accountability in government, and we want transparency, and we're going to get it as part of our negotiations.
Okay. Well, you know what? We'll get you guys back here right after the session is over to see how it ended. So all of you, thank you again for serving, for coming here, for doing all the hard
Thank you,
work.
Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us. And remember, if you have any questions about what you saw today or any other questions, your representative and senators are always available to speak with you. See you next time on Capitol Update.